The bridge of the Eternal Dominion had become a tomb of silence, broken only by the steady hum of life support systems and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. Admiral Corinth Val's clawed hand remained frozen over the attack order controls, every instinct in his predatory body warring between advance and retreat. Around him, his crew waited with the tense anticipation of prey animals sensing an approaching storm. "Admiral," Commander Yixon whispered, her compound eyes fixed on the tactical display where over 1,000 human ships maintained their impossible formation. "Orders, sir?" Before Corinth Val could respond, every screen on the bridge flickered and changed. The tactical displays, communication monitors, even the environmental readouts, all showed the same thing: a single human figure materializing in holographic form throughout the ship. Marcus Kane stood before them, his black armor seeming to absorb the bridge's lighting. Though his face remained hidden behind the featureless helmet, every being present could feel his attention like a physical weight pressing down on them. "Admiral Corinth Val," Kane said, his voice carrying the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. "I believe we need to talk." The Admiral found his voice after several attempts. "Kane, I should have expected you to appear." "Should you?" Kane tilted his helmeted head slightly. "Tell me, Admiral, what exactly did you expect when you brought a fleet to threaten human children?" Corinth Val's training kicked in, forcing confidence into his voice that he didn't feel. "I expected to enforce galactic law against an illegal settlement. I expected a swift military victory against a minor colonial outpost." Kane's chuckle was soft, almost gentle, and somehow more terrifying than any battle cry. "You expected to bully farmers into submission. You thought humans would behave like every other species you've conquered. Submit when faced with overwhelming force. Negotiate for favorable terms of surrender." The mercenary began walking across the bridge, his footsteps echoing despite being just a hologram. Each crew member he passed seemed to shrink into their stations, as if his mere presence could somehow reach through the projection to touch them. "The problem, Admiral, is that you fundamentally misunderstood what you were attacking," Kane continued. "You see farmers and miners and shopkeepers, and you think civilians. You see families with children and assume weakness. You look at our short lifespans and limited technology and conclude inferior." Kane stopped directly in front of Corinth Val's command chair, and the Admiral felt an overwhelming urge to look away from that blank faceplate. "But you forgot to ask the most important question." "Which is? How exactly did a species like humanity survive long enough to reach the stars?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the bridge, crew members exchanged worried glances, suddenly realizing they had never considered this fundamental point about human evolution. Kane turned to address the entire bridge crew, his voice taking on the tone of a professor delivering a lecture. "Earth is not a kind world. It never was. For millions of years, our ancestors faced ice ages that would have frozen most species into extinction, plagues that killed entire continents, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for decades." The holographic figure gestured toward the tactical display, where the human fleet continued its patient vigil. "Every human alive today carries the genetic legacy of survivors, not just individuals who lived through disasters, but entire bloodlines that refused to give up even when death seemed certain." Commander Yixon's mandibles clicked nervously. Surely environmental challenges cannot compare to modern military force. Kane's helmet turned toward her with mechanical precision. "Can't they? Tell me, Commander, how many of your species' worlds have survived direct impact from planet-killer asteroids?" Yixon's compound eyes went wide. "None, of course. Such an impact would mean extinction." "Earth has survived 6 major extinction events," Kane replied calmly. "Asteroids that vaporized continents, volcanic eruptions that lasted for millions of years, climate changes that would have ended most civilizations, And somehow our ancestors kept going. The mercenary resumed his pacing, each step seemingly driving his point deeper into the minds of his audience. But the most important thing Earth taught humanity wasn't how to survive disasters. It was how to survive each other. Admiral Corinth Val felt his throat constrict. What do you mean? Humans spent 100,000 years perfecting warfare against the most dangerous predator species they ever encountered, other humans. Kane's voice carried an edge that made the bridge's environmental controls seem inadequate. Every tactic, every strategy, every innovation in the art of killing was developed by humans fighting humans. On the tactical display, the human ships began moving in subtle formations that seemed almost organic in their complexity. While other species developed technology to explore the stars, humans developed technology to wage war. When the Vreks created their first starship, humans were building weapons that could end civilizations. When the Altarians achieved faster-than-light travel, humans were learning how to turn planets into battlefields. Kane stopped and faced the Admiral directly. You brought 47 capital ships to intimidate 8,000 farmers. Do you know what those farmers see when they look at your fleet? Corinth Val's voice was barely a whisper. What do they see? Target practice. The bridge erupted in nervous movement as crew members checked their stations and weapon systems. Kane's words carried a weight of certainty that made military doctrine seem like wishful thinking. Sir, Lieutenant Zex called out, his voice cracking with stress. The human ships are powering up their weapons. Energy signatures are off the charts. Kane nodded approvingly. Governor Chen tried to warn you, Admiral. She offered you the chance to leave peacefully. But like every other species that has encountered humanity, you assumed our mercy was weakness. On the main display, the human fleet began to glow with that same eerie blue light that had appeared earlier, but now the illumination was spreading, connecting each ship to its neighbors in a web of energy that pulsed like a living heartbeat. What kind of weapons are those? Corinth Val demanded. You're asking the wrong question, Kane replied. It's not what kind of weapons they are, it's who built them. The mercenary gestured toward the display, where the energy web continued to expand and intensify. Those ships weren't modified by military engineers or weapons specialists. They were upgraded by farmers who jury-rig equipment to work in impossible conditions, by miners who create tools to function in environments that would kill most beings instantly, by parents who will literally move mountains to protect their children. Commander Yixon stared at her sensor readings in disbelief. The energy output from their fleet is impossible. Those ships shouldn't be able to generate that much power. Kane's laughter was soft, but carried an undertone that made Corinth Val's scales itch. Shouldn't is a word humans have never learned to accept. When our ancestors needed to cross oceans, they built boats from trees and animal skins. When they needed to fly, they strapped engines to metal frames and threw themselves into the sky. When they needed to reach the stars, they sat on top of controlled explosions and rode them into space. The energy web connecting the human ships reached critical intensity, creating a lattice of power that seemed to bend space itself around the fleet. What you call impossible, humans call Tuesday. Admiral, his tactical officer called out in panic. Their entire fleet just vanished from our sensors. All ships gone. Kane nodded approvingly. Stealth technology adapted from mining equipment. When you need to extract resources from asteroid fields without disturbing the debris patterns, you learn to become invisible. Corinth Val spun toward his sensor stations, watching his crew desperately try to re-establish contact with the human fleet. Where are they? Everywhere, Kane replied simply. As if summoned by his words, human ships began materializing throughout the coalition formation, not approaching from a distance, but appearing directly among the military vessels, their modified hulls gleaming with residual energy from whatever propulsion system had brought them there. Impossible, Corinth Val whispered. No ship can teleport through military shields. True, Kane agreed, but human ships don't teleport. They phase shift through dimensional barriers using technology that started as deep-core mining equipment. When you need to extract materials from planetary cores without destabilizing the planet, you learn to work in dimensions that most species don't even know exist. The tactical display showed human vessels positioned with mathematical precision throughout the Coalition fleet. Each military ship now had at least 3 human vessels within point-blank range, their weapons trained on critical systems. This is your final warning, Admiral, Kane said, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of inevitable consequence. Order your fleet to withdraw immediately, or discover why the galaxy's most dangerous beings are all afraid of human farmers. Corinth Val looked around his bridge, seeing the fear in every crew member's eyes. These were hardened military personnel who had faced down pirates, rebels, and hostile alien forces without flinching. But the presence of the human fleet had reduced them to terrified beings who understood they were completely outmatched. How? He asked finally. How is this possible? Kane's helmet tilted slightly, and when he spoke, his voice carried something that might have been sympathy. Because you misunderstood what humans are, Admiral. You thought we were just another species trying to find our place in galactic civilization. You assumed we would follow the same patterns as everyone else. The mercenary gestured toward the tactical display, where over 1,000 human ships held perfect formation despite having appeared through impossible means. But humans aren't like other species. We didn't evolve to fit into existing ecosystems. We evolved to change them. We didn't develop technology to explore the universe. We created it to reshape reality according to our needs. Kane's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing everyone to strain to hear. Every human child grows up learning the same lesson their ancestors learned millions of years ago. When the universe says something is impossible, you find a way to make it possible anyway. When reality doesn't match your needs, you change reality. Admiral Corinth Val stared at the tactical display, watching his vastly superior military force held hostage by a collection of civilian vessels that had somehow achieved technological superiority through pure stubborn determination. Governor Chen, he said into his communicator, his voice heavy with defeat. I believe we may have misunderstood the situation. Chen's warm laughter filled the bridge, carrying no malice despite her overwhelming tactical advantage. No harm done, Admiral. We all make mistakes. The important thing is learning from them. What do you want us to do? Just go home, she replied simply. Take your fleet, file whatever reports you need to file, and find something better to do with your time than threatening human families. Kane's holographic form began to fade, but his voice remained clear and strong. And Admiral, when you make those reports, I want you to include a message for anyone else who might be considering similar actions. What message? The mercenary's image disappeared completely, but his final words seemed to echo from the metal walls themselves. Tell them that Marcus Kane keeps his promises. And tell them that every human in the galaxy is Marcus Kane. The bridge fell into absolute silence as the implications sank in. They hadn't been facing a single legendary mercenary or even a well-armed colonial militia. They had been confronting an entire species that had spent millennia learning how to turn the impossible into the inevitable. On the tactical display, the human ships began withdrawing with the same coordinated precision they had shown throughout the encounter. Within minutes, the Coalition fleet found itself alone in space, surrounded by nothing but stars and the echo of laughter from farmers who had just sent the galaxy's most powerful military force running for home. Admiral Corinth Val slumped in his command chair, finally understanding why Marcus Kane had issued his warning. It hadn't been the threat of a single mercenary. It had been a promise from humanity itself. 3 days later, emergency sessions were called in every major galactic government. The message from Haven's Rest spread through communication networks faster than light itself, carrying with it a fundamental shift in how the galaxy viewed its newest members. Humans were no longer the primitive upstarts struggling to find their place among established civilizations. They were the species that had looked at the laws of physics and decided they were merely suggestions. The beings who had taken civilian mining equipment and turned it into weapons that could make military fleets disappear. Marcus Kane's warning had been proven prophetic in the most literal way possible. Anyone who chose to threaten human families would indeed have to deal with him, not because he was everywhere at once, but because every human was him. The galaxy had learned a lesson that would echo through the halls of power for generations to come. There are no human civilians. There are only humans who aren't currently fighting. And when humans fight, they don't just win. They redefine what victory means. In cantinas and trading posts across the spiral arm, beings would speak in hushed tones about the day 1,000 farmers made the galaxy's most powerful fleet retreat without firing a single shot. About the species that had turned stubbornness into a weapon more dangerous than any technology. But perhaps the most terrifying part of the story wasn't what humans had done. It was the knowledge that next time, they would be even more prepared. Because humans, as the galaxy was finally learning, never made the same mistake twice, and they never, ever forgot.